Hello, nerdy romantics. Today's episode is going over, yes, I know it's a little bit into 2024 already, so you're probably thinking 2023 is gone and we don't want to talk about it anymore. But there were some really cool movies that came out in the superhero verse, I'm going to call it, of DC and Marvel that I do want to talk about. And today we've got Perry, our guest co-host, here to talk about them with me. And so the movies that we're going to discuss in DC that came out in 2023 are The Flash, Aquaman 2, The Lost Kingdom, Shazam 2, Fury of the Gods, Blue Beetle. On the Marvel side, we've got Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and The Marvels. So, everybody get ready. We are talking superhero movies today. And it probably goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. Spoiler alert here on all of these movies. We are going to spoil these movies, especially Blue Beetle. So, if you have not seen these movies yet and you want to, please, please, please go see these movies and then come back and hear our recap and discuss with us. This is the Nerdy Romantics Podcast, and I'm your host, Y.M. Nelson. Okay, Perry, how are you doing today?
I am doing great. I'm so happy to be here. I am really excited to talk about these films with you today.
I am so excited too, because I was like, there's got to be a nerd out there that loves these movies as much, or was at least as interested in talking about these movies as I was, even though it is now halfway into 2024. But Perry, it's been a while since you've been on the podcast. Tell us, what are you doing now?
I would be happy to. Well, so if people know me and know you from when you appeared on my show, I am the host of the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. So where we talk all about superhero movies and TV shows. At the moment, we're on a bit of a hiatus, but we're planning to record new episodes pretty soon. And some of those that we're talking about today, we have talked about on the show, but I've still got lots to say about them.
Love it.
Anyway. And I'm also an author too. I have an urban fantasy series that should be releasing a new book by the time this comes out. So that is the Dark Crossroads series of urban fantasy novels. Started off with the Luther Cross series, continued on with the Morningstar series. And the latest book is the second book in the Mark of Cain series. That's going to be called Killer's Prey. I am, fingers crossed, I am going to have that out by the beginning of June. And I also released a superhero comic book that I did with my friends Thomas DJ and Eric Johns called Paragons of Earth. We only managed to get one issue of that. Unfortunately, our crowdfunder did not do what we expected, but we did finish the comic and we are releasing the issue. And what we did there is we took a bunch of superheroes from the public domain, kind of gave them a fresh coat of paint, redesigned them, reimagined them, and put them together as kind of like our own public domain Justice League. So that's another tie with what we're doing today.
Oh, yeah, awesome. Yeah, because there's a lot of reimagining, in my opinion, that's going on in these 2023 movies. Yeah, from what we originally know. Or as everybody knows here, y'all already know, I love comics and respect comics as canon, but I was not a comic book reader back in the day, and I have not become the comic book reader that I want to be, but I do know some of the stories.
We'll get you someday. We'll get you roped in someday.
I'm pretty sure I'm halfway there. Let's be honest. I'm halfway there. Because every time, a movie comes out like this, I always think because I'm such a Trekkie on that side, I'm always thinking of people who have read these comic books and have grown up with them. What do they think when they see X or when they see Y, whatever it is? Because it may not actually be true to the comic, or they may be reimagining the comic, or, something of that nature. So Perry, let's be honest, I'm halfway there. But it's...
just so you know, Marvel Unlimited has a 97-cent deal right now.
Oh my gosh. See, you're going to hook me. I'm telling you.
I'm going to hook you. That is my goal. I'm going to get you one of these days.
Oh, gosh. But, Perry, it sounds like you do have a lot going on, and I feel you on the writer's side with the fingers crossed trying to get a book out. I feel you on that. Oh.
I'm also working on a serial because I'm going to be starting up a subscription platform soon on Ream.
Nice.
So I've got that I'm trying to get this. It's a serial that's inspired by Power Rangers and Super Sentai. So I am halfway through with the first season of that. So I could release it right now, but I'm just so nervous that I'm not going to have time to get the rest of the season finished. So I'm trying to backlog as many episodes as I can. I'm also writing with Sterling and Stone, and I've got an urban fantasy novel that I'm working on with them with a co-writer right now as well.
How do you sleep?
I do not. I have 2 toddlers, so I do not sleep. They started preschools lately, though, so fortunately I have a little bit more free time.
Oh my gosh, I love the kitties, though. Oh, so cool, so cool. Well, y'all, let's get started talking about these movies because I know both of us have a lot to say. We're going to actually split this up, even though I kind of thought about maybe not doing that, but we're going to split this up because I know we got a lot to say. We're going to talk about DC first. Well, Perry, for me, the first movie that I watched that I thought, hey, we probably should do a podcast episode about this was The Flash. And my first impressions, we're gonna do a review. Everybody, we're gonna do a review. We'll do a rating system. And Perry, I'll remind you what the rating system is here. But I wanted to kind of talk first impressions first. When I first started watching it, I thought, okay, all right, this is what we're dealing with. But I had, of course, in my mind, and I've always felt this way about DC, the fact that they do not bring the TV shows in with the movies, the way that Marvel has everything kind of intersected, and the way they have the actors playing things on the movies and the TV shows, and how the stories interweave, that makes me as a watcher want to watch everything so I get the whole story. And the first thing that I thought when I watched The Flash, the movie, now I already knew, it's not going to be Grant Gustin here, but I also have this lower expectation, I guess, when I go in, because I know I'm not getting the Flash version from the CW that I love and that I've been, with pretty much watching it episode for episode for at least the first 6 seasons. And I've, of course, watched all of it now. But so I have a low expectation. But as the movie played, I thought, wow, they really did this story. They really did something really good with this. The Flash was played nervously and like a nerd. And Iris was a lot of what I thought Iris should be, or me personally, what I thought Iris should be. And I just thought, the acting of the Flash was very much, nerdy, odd, almost having kind of a neurodivergent, a little bit representation, which I respect. I don't know if that was what the purpose of it was, but I was really impressed as I was watching. And I want to know if you thought the same thing or if you were not in that camp.
So we're gonna start off with the fight.
Right, all right. All right, I'm loving it.
Oh God. Okay, so I am sorry about that. My
You know I can edit it out.
I was still connected to my tab. All right. Anyway, I was just looking up the IMDb, so I had the names correct on my phone, and Tap decided that it wanted to chime in.
Gotcha.
But so I tend to disconnect the TV, all these things from the comics. So I'm not one of those people who is, if it doesn't match the comics 100%, then I hate it. I'm not one of those types. I understand that they got to make changes, and sometimes some stuff doesn't translate as well. And when we get to the Marvel stuff, we're going to be talking about Guardians of the Galaxy, which they took tons of liberties with those characters, and I love those movies. So I'm not one of those people who's like, it's not like the comics, so it sucks. But
I call them purists.
And yeah. And even when it comes to like you're talking about how Marvel has everything linked together with movies and TV, whereas DC has it separate. Mostly I'm cool with that too, because DC too in the comics, they've always had the multiverse stuff, and they've had like the Earth 1 and Earth 2 stuff. So it's kind of cool in a way to see that reflected in the movies and TV shows, and to see these different versions of these characters. So I was okay with all that stuff too. That didn't bother me. But what it comes down to is just, I do not like Ezra Miller's portrayal of Barry Allen at all.
Wow.
Like, I understand being divorced from the comics and doing your own thing, but I think you need to stay true to the spirit of the character, and Ezra Miller is not at all in the spirit of Barry Allen. Like, and I'm not even a huge Flash fan, right? I've only read like a handful of Flash comics, but what I know of the character, Ezra Miller is completely divorced from any version of that character that I have ever seen in any medium. He is just, and he's just doing his own thing, and I don't care for it. Kiersey Clemons, I think that was the actress's name who played Iris. Yeah, she was good. I thought she did a pretty good job. I thought most of the supporting cast in the movie was great. I mean, Michael Keaton is still at the top of his game. Oh my gosh. He was amazing.
He was totally amazing. I was like, oh.
Yes.
I want you as Batman again.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
He was
great.
He's the high point of the movie. He's the saving grace of this whole movie. Yes, agreed. Absolutely. And Sasha Cale did a great job as Supergirl. Yes. And, she, because I know we're not going to talk too much about it, but because of Ezra Miller's, international crime spree, he wasn't able to do any press for this movie. Or they, I'm sorry. They weren't able to do any press for this movie. And obviously, Michael Keaton, he's just kind of like, I don't really care. So I'm not going to do any press for the movie. So it's Sasha Cale who's doing, she had to hold all the marketing for this movie on her shoulders by herself, and she was very enthusiastic about it, and she did such a great job as Supergirl. I'm really excited that we're going to get the new James Gunn Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, especially because that was an amazing comic book. But at the same time, I feel like we kind of missed out on not seeing more of Sasha Cale, because she did such a great job.
Okay, not going to be in it.
No. They've got a different actress. They're rebooting the whole thing basically.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess we could talk a little bit about that, because as much as I've tried to stay off of social media, so I don't get my whole how I see it tainted. I do know, and we do know that they obviously, DCEU has just whole new management, and they've thrown out a lot of people that we're not going to mention too many names, but they've thrown out a lot of people that probably shouldn't have been thrown out. And they're just kind of revamping everything and starting over. So these movies in 2023 were the last of this version of the DCEU, correct? Am I correct in all of this?
Yeah, that's correct. Well, Apparently, they're doing a second season of Peacemaker, though, so
Yeah.
they're still using the same actors from that. Viola Davis is still staying on as Amanda
Right.
Waller. John Cena is still staying on as
Because
Peacemaker.
they know
so
better.
all the people from that are right. So all those guys are still staying around, which I'm of two minds. On the one hand, I think a clean break completely would have been best. On the other hand, I really loved Peacemaker. I think Viola Davis was a brilliant casting choice, and they kept Judi Dench around when they rebooted Bond, so it's not like there's no precedent for this.
Yeah.
So I'm cautiously optimistic.
Okay.
Let's say.
So I don't know if I'm cautiously optimistic. I don't know if I'm optimistic at all. Let's be honest. Yeah.
I will say this. James Gunn has never made a superhero movie that I have not liked.
Well, that brings in a little bit of optimism for me.
Yeah. I mean, and you see the stuff he's posting about Superman Legacy, or no, it's just called Superman.
Yes.
They just released the first image of David Corn's sweat as Superman. I mean, they're bringing back the trunks and everything. I mean, he's really he's really leaning into the comic side of thing, and he did the same thing with the Guardians movies. So I'm very excited to see what he does.
Yes, I forgot he was he did the Guardians movies, which okay. I'm feeling a little bit better about this, but.
And he did Peacemaker as well, and the Suicide Squad, the second Suicide Squad movie, the good Suicide Squad movie.
Wow, I didn't know he did that one. Yeah, that was good. That was a good one. Okay, so I feel a little bit better about this. I will say though, I do think they need to revamp. I do think, I'm glad they decided to do this because they did need to revamp.
It's kind of a mystery why they didn't do it earlier. Instead, they had this weird, kind of patchwork thing that was going on, and it just didn't really make much sense.
I'm just like, okay, this took too long for you to figure this out. But then I also wonder in Hollywood if it is as long as we think out here in the real world. But it feels like, they should have seen the writing on the wall a little while ago. I mean, even...
Yeah, a lot of it, there was a lot of, behind the scenes stuff going on, with all the Warner Brothers management, they kept changing ownership, and they kept bringing in new executives, so there was all that kind of stuff going on back and forth, too.
Exactly. But so I'm going to sort of agree with you on the Ezra Miller portrayal a little bit, only because I like Grant Gustin's portrayal of the Flash.
Grant Gustin was amazing. I loved Grant Gustin.
And so that's what it's like. Nothing is going to compare to that, to me.
Yeah, even the later seasons of that show where
they were getting crazy and
it was a struggle. It was a struggle to get through those last two seasons, I'll be honest. But still, I still loved both Grant Gustin and I can't remember who plays Iris on the show, but I loved her as well. And I stuck with it. I made it through the last season, and the last few episodes were pretty good. They kind of returned to form a little bit at the end.
And I think they wrapped that up well, even though it was a struggle to get to the wrap up point. And the whole, we've got to try to make this family that we see 25 years down the road. I was like, oh, Lord. No, we don't. we don't have to worry about doing that. And then I will say this, though, but I know actors have different commitments and everything. But, when Cisco left The Flash, whatever the actor's name is, that played Cisco Ramon, when he left, to me it kind of started going downhill there, and I felt
I agree totally.
I felt like the seasons after that they were trying to do too much with the crossovers, because they were trying to bring in Superman and Lois, and then they were trying to bring in Batwoman, and Batwoman changed. She didn't look the same as she did before. Okay. So, the crossover episodes, which were something that I I liked those in the very beginning, the crossover episodes, and you would follow it each week, each episode, you would follow it through the different shows and things like that. And it just like the last crossover they did, or the last two crossovers maybe, I was just like, I don't want to have to find these, because I was in streaming point at that time. It was like I was, streaming them. And so it was just like, it was a little much. But, kind of getting off the point of the Flash, the movie, but want to go back to that. But I do want to agree that, yes, to me, the Ezra Miller portrayal is just not going to live up to the Grant Gustin portrayal, in my opinion. It's just,
no, it's absolutely not.
There's just no way. And so, and also, of course, when I watched this, all of the outside stuff with the actor was going on, or had gone on, and stuff like that. And then they said, we're going to keep this dude. And I said, well, we're going to keep this person. And I said, what?
It's even more galling when it taints it so much, but it's even more galling when you find out the fact that they, trashed the Batgirl movie that they had made, which also had Michael Keaton in it and had Leslie, I can't remember the actress's name, but she looked great in the photos we saw. And they're just like, we're gonna throw this out because David Zaslav needs a tax cut to pay for his bonus. But we're going to release The Flash.
Right.
And, they even had, I'm convinced that James Gunn probably never even saw this movie, and David Zaslav's just like, the only superhero movie David Zaslav even knows of is The Dark Knight. So he just told James Gunn, say it's as good as The Dark Knight. Say it's as good as The Dark Knight. And
gosh.
James Gunn is probably like, fine, I'll say this to get the boss off my back so I can get back to working on these movies. And so he said, yes, it's good. It's the best movie since The Dark Knight. And then I watch it, and I'm just like, this is such a piece of crap. And even with all my, preconceived biases against Ezra Miller, I hated them in Justice League.
Oh,
both versions I hated them in.
I will agree. I hated them in that too.
Yeah, and so I put aside my preconceived biases because I'm just like, look, I'm very excited about Michael Keaton. And that first trailer we saw, I'm like, okay, this looks like it might be interesting. So I'm willing to give it a shot. And I was actually going to see it in the theater, but I actually got COVID like the day before I was going to go see it in the theater. So, and I am very thankful that I did not pay money to see it as a result.
Yeah. To be honest, I'm going to say, I saw none of these in the theater, y'all. None. There are a couple I wish I had seen in the theater, but this is not one of those. So I guess it makes the blow that it doesn't make it makes it a little bit less. But yeah, okay. So we are agreed that I like this one a lot better than you did. Okay, yeah. So before we get too much into it, our ratings are 1, we didn't like it. 2, it was okay. 3, we liked it. 4, we really liked it. And 5, it was amazing. And these ratings are based on the Goodreads star ratings on Goodreads. Yes, we are a book podcast, but we are talking about movies now. But these movies are made from books. Hey, there we go. So I am going to give this one, obviously I'm going to give this one at least 3 stars because I did like it. I will say though, Ezra Miller's portrayal is not why I liked it. I did like Iris, but what I think I started to see and started to like about what's happening here is that there are a lot of Easter eggs that happen, Batman Easter eggs, Superman Easter eggs. There was even a Barbie Easter egg. They did mention Barbie. For some reason, I felt like the Flash theme here was a recycle of the Matrix theme. I don't know. I can't remember exactly how it sounded, but I did write that down.
Well, the main thing that annoyed me too, beyond just the Ezra Miller of it all, was just the fact that I mean, it seems like the the studio, I think Warner Brothers seems to think there's only one Flash story that exists because they just keep adapting Flashpoint.
That's the
other
third
adaptation we got of this.
That was the other thing though I didn't like. Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that because that was one thing that I really didn't like, is that they are just recycling Flashpoint over and over and over again. And I'm not a comic book reader, but I do know that there are issues with Flashpoint. Like, people have serious opinions about Flashpoint, and I feel like this is probably not the story we should keep redoing over and over. Right? Pick something else.
It's a good story. I'm not gonna knock the original story. It's a good story, but the whole thing about Flashpoint is that's the first story you're telling it with the Flash. You're kind of leaving a lot of stuff out. You have to have that build up to it and all that. And so when you start off with Flashpoint, you have no frame of reference, especially when you're gonna. Because one of the great things about Flashpoint was you got to see the other versions of these characters in the original story. So in the original story, in the Flashpoint world, it creates this new reality where you have Aquaman and Wonder Woman going to war. Bruce Wayne is the one who died as a kid. So now you have his father, Thomas Wayne, becomes a much more violent Batman. Martha Wayne goes insane and she becomes the Joker. And it's this really creative use of like redefining the world. Superman and the Supergirl thing you have here where she's locked up and everything, that's basically Superman in Flashpoint. And the thing that kills me is you have all these actors there to do Flashpoint. I mean, you could have had, I always blank on his name, but the guy who played Thomas Wayne in Batman v Superman, he was also John Winchester on Supernatural. He was in
I know who you're talking about.
He was Negan in The Walking Dead. He would have made amazing Flashpoint Thomas Wayne, and that would have been awesome to see that there. I mean, I love that we got to see Michael Keaton, but it doesn't really make any sense why Ezra Miller traveling back in time suddenly transforms Ben Affleck into Michael Keaton. Does not work at all.
Yeah,
doesn't make any sense.
It's just really weird that whole. And then for some reason I wrote down, how are they going to deal with Henry Cavill no longer being Superman? And I guess that was kind of in that, when they were actually going back and showing all that other stuff. And I think they kind of blanked out Superman when they were showing all the Flashpoint, stuff.
That was
blanked him out.
God, that was supposed to be, because that wasn't, like, Henry Cavill actually did film the ending was supposed to be different. There were like 3 different endings filmed. There was one where Sasha Cale and Michael Keaton were now in this new reality that was formed, and they were like basically the Superman and Batman of this new reality. Obviously Supergirl, and there was another ending filmed with the actors from Justice League. So you had Henry Cavill there, you had Gal Gadot, you had Jason Momoa, and all of them. They were in at the Justice League in the end there. So they had these different endings filmed. So it's not that they couldn't get Henry Cavill. Cavill wanted to come back as Superman. That's why he did the cameo at the end of Black Adam and all that too. But he ended up being a pawn in Dwayne Johnson's power play, and he ended up getting sacrificed as a result of that. And so Henry Cavill wanted to come back. He was all set to come back. But that blanked out one, that was supposed to be Christopher Reeve. Like they had brought, that's why you had Helen Slater's Supergirl there too.
Okay.
So, which is, and then you also had the George Reeves Superman, which that one I think is really tasteless because it's one thing. Christopher Reeve, it's one thing, right? He was always very proud of Superman and like the work he did. He was always, he came back for Smallville and all that. And I'm sure if he was still alive, he would totally have come back to do a cameo as Superman in this. Yeah. So, I mean, so I don't have as much of a problem with Christopher Reeve. Same thing with Adam West, them bringing him, recreating him. I didn't have a problem with that because, again, he was always very proud of the work he did. But George Reeves, the man shot himself because he was so despondent over the fact that Superman basically killed his career. And you're going to resurrect him using bad CGI? Yeah. That's just unbelievably tasteless, especially when you have so many still living actors who've played different versions of these characters that could have come in. I mean, how come you didn't have Grant Gustin and John Wesley Shipp in a Flash movie
Exactly.
where he's seeing these other
Right.
versions. I mean, you could have brought in Brandon Routh, give him another try as
Why
Superman,
not?
or have Tom Welling or anyone, or
even
see if,
Tyler.
I don't know. I know
Tyler
they asked.
Hoechlin, the one who's playing.
Well, yeah, Tyler
Superman
Hoechlin, yeah,
now.
exactly,
It's
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, apparently they did ask Christian Bale, and Christian Bale was like, "Hell no."
He's like, I want to keep my career looking like, I want to keep it doing.
I will say though, I did get a kick out of George Clooney.
I know, right? Oh boy. Oh, so there's so much going on here. It's like, I agree with you about Flashpoint. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot there. If this is your first kind of introduction into the Flash, that's probably not the place that you want to get introduced to this character as Flashpoint. And I'm trying to think about it. I mean, even with the TV show, we didn't get introduced to Flashpoint. Flashpoint was like season 3, I think.
I believe so. Yeah, it was. I'm pretty sure it was season 3.
So you're already kind of, there's stuff building and there's stuff happening and things are in place for Flashpoint to happen, which that was also, if I remember correctly, a little bit polarizing. People were like, they didn't do Flashpoint right there. Yeah, it's just one of those storylines that is just like, is this where you want to start? Is this what you want to put out there for the...
Especially when, you had... If you're not going to do Flashpoint in this alternate world and you're going to create this new world that you're going to do with Flashpoint, okay, fine. But, I mean, the response to Ezra Miller's performance in Justice League was, at best, mixed. Like, with all the problems people had with that movie, both versions of it, like... The actors' performances were not one of the problems. Like, I think almost everybody thought that the actors did a pretty good job with what they were given, with the exception of Ezra Miller. So why are you going to have 2 Ezra Millers in this movie?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And the thing about the Ezra Miller character, this is just me. This is my personal opinion about the Ezra Miller portrayal, not character. I'm sorry, the Ezra Miller portrayal in Justice League that I was not looking forward to here, but I thought changed a little bit was I thought he was just this big jerk. He was just like a know-it-all. He was playing it like I'm a know-it-all jerk on on caffeine like 24/7. And this wasn't as much of that portrayal, in my opinion. It wasn't as much know-it-all. He was still a little bit like, okay, you still need to put the coffee pot down. But but I don't know. I don't know what were you gonna say? I'm sorry.
I actually think it got worse in this one because that first scene where he's whining about the fact that he's saving people, and I'm just like, come on. And then the bad CGI in this movie was unbelievable. I mean, like, you invested so much money into this movie and you give us these ugly CGI baby in a microwave.
Yes, that was horrible. I'm agreeing with you on that. That was totally horrible. And for it to be, a studio movie with a lot of money behind it, you would think that would be better. That was horrible.
Yeah. Also, one positive thing I will say is, like, we got so robbed of Ben Affleck because, man, he, even with his terrible costume in this movie, he still sells it. And, like, he was so good in this movie. And it's such a tragedy that we didn't get to see a really solid Ben Affleck as Batman movie, because I think if he was given a director who actually knew about this character, and if he himself was able to direct that solo Batman movie, and there weren't all these studio politics involved, I think we'd be talking about Ben Affleck's Batman in the same breath as we talk about Michael Keaton and Christian Bale.
Wow, amazing. Okay. Okay, something to think about. I will say though, yeah, I agree with you on Ben Affleck's performance here, and I had never really been a fan of him as Batman. But now that you're saying it, all the politics and everything, I'm like, well, maybe he just didn't get a chance to be as good as he could be, because we saw part of that here. I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
he was good here.
The character was so saddled with the weight of the script that the scripts were putting on him, because they were trying to put Batman Bruce Wayne in this very limited box that didn't really fit that character. And if you look at what he does in those movies, like especially in as much as I don't like the Joss Whedon cut of Justice League, you can start to see these little flashes of what he could do as Batman if he was given the chance. In all of these movies, and also in the Zack Snyder Justice League and Batman v Superman, you see these flashes if you look closely at his performance of how good he could have been had he gotten a good script.
Yeah. I'm still loving Michael Keaton though.
Oh God, he is
amazing. Yeah, he saved this movie. He saved this movie. Yeah.
We have to get a Batman Beyond movie with him playing old Bruce Wayne. I mean, he looks the part. He looks perfectly of it. And someone had said this to me on, I think it was on my show, that the perfect guy to play like Terry McGinnis would be, I'm blanking on the actor's name, but he plays Johnny Lawrence's son in Cobra Kai.
Oh, yes. Yes, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh, yeah. I'm like, he would be, when I heard that, I'm just like, oh my God, you're right. He would be perfect for Terry McGinnis.
Totally. Yes. Oh, wow. Wow, you got me thinking about all of this. I didn't even think about this. I'm just thinking, hey, this Flash movie might be, something okay. But now you got me thinking about all this other stuff. I'm like, oh, see, this is why I needed to talk to you, Perry. This is why we needed to nerd out about this. But we talked a long time about The Flash, and I will say The Flash was like kind of the first one where I thought, hey, we probably need to talk about these superhero movies. And I will also say it was, compared to the rest that I watched, it was the worst one. Yeah. But
it was definitely the worst one.
Yeah. But I liked it more than you liked it, Perry. Like I said, I'm giving it 3 stars because I did like it.
I mean, can I give it negative stars?
Yeah. All right, that's fine. That's totally fine. You can totally do that.
I will give Michael Keaton though 5 stars.
Yes.
Though. Like he definitely got 5 stars.
We agree on that.
I'd go above 5 stars for him. Yes.
We agree on that. We totally agree on that. So let's move on to the next one I've got is Blue Beetle. And I am going to say right now, Perry, I knew absolutely nothing about Blue Beetle except that I knew the way that they were doing this origin story is not the origin story of Blue Beetle from the comics. I'm thinking.
I'm not as familiar. I'm also not very familiar with Blue Beetle in the comics, at least not this version. I'm a little bit more familiar with the Ted Kord version of Blue Beetle, but only slightly. Like I haven't really read a whole lot of stuff with either of them. The Jaime Reyes version, I've never read any of his comics. Most of my familiarity with him actually comes from the Young Justice TV series.
Oh, okay.
Because that's mostly where I've seen him. But it's just never really. So I was very kind of meh about this movie. I was just kind of like, I'll give it a pass. I'm probably not interested in seeing it. And until I found out that, again, the Cobra Kai connection we had. I am really sorry, but I am positive I'm going to butcher his name. But Xolo Maridueña as Jaime Reyes. I love him in Cobra Kai. Right. So when I heard he was going to be playing, Jaime, I'm like, okay, you have my attention now. I still didn't rush out to the theater to see it. I finally did see it because we did a ranking of all the DCEU films on Superhero Cinephiles with my buddy Justin DeVoe. So I saw it because of that. And so I watched it because of that. And honestly, this was like in my top echelon of the DCEU rankings. It was surprisingly good. I think I got to give this a 4.
Oh my gosh, you're going to agree on something here. I love this one. I really love this one. And as much as I, did not know about this character, maybe it's because I didn't know about the character that I could actually go in and appreciate what was happening. But I think for me, more so was I loved everything that they were doing with the story. I loved all the portrayals that were happening. Like George Lopez as Uncle Rudy. What?
He was brilliant. And oh my God, the grandma.
Yes, the grandma. Oh gosh! And then when she pulls out that Uzi looking thing, and she's like, "Now this is how you take down the." I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
Right,
she was
and
so amazing.
But the funny thing is too, like that was so steeped into actual Latin American history too. That's like, because people who grew up in America, they don't know about all the crap the CIA got up to in Central and South America.
Totally.
It's only stuff I learned about, when I was in university, and later I read this excellent book called Legacy of Ashes, which is all about the history of the CIA and the they name dropped the School of the Americas. I have never seen that name dropped in a Western movie, a big Hollywood production even, ever in my lifetime. And they just came right out and addressed it. I'm like, oh my God. And they made the guy sympathetic as a result of that. Exactly. And I'm just like, this movie, it's so much more subversive than I ever would have expected.
Oh my gosh. It was amazing. I was like, okay, so this was what I wrote down. And this was probably, I think this was around the time when they were actually going in to get Jaime, to get Blue Beetle. And, they were, actually getting getting everything together so they can go in and get him. I said, oh man, if Republicans knew about this movie, they would ban it.
Yeah. Well, even centrist Democrats, because Susan Sarandon was basically playing Hillary Clinton.
Exactly. She totally was. Oh my God. I'm like, this movie was no holds barred. And I'm like, I have never seen, like, the closest I've seen is Black Panther, Wakanda Forever.
Yes.
That's the closest I've seen a big franchise movie come to doing the socio-political things that they did in this movie.
I will also say Winter Soldier, Captain America, the Winter Soldier.
I agree with you on
that. But yes, otherwise I agree with you. Like, and especially for them to do it in Blue Beetle and to do it in the way they did it. Like, it's there, but it's subtle enough where I think most people wouldn't pick up on it, which might be a criticism in some sense, but it wasn't like this. They did it. I mean, I loved it. I loved everything about this movie, and I even like the references to stuff in the comics. Like, they, because I thought, like, how are they going to do Blue Beetle when they've got this whole legacy stuff with him and everything? And they did it. They threw in like the old Ted Kord and Dan Garrett Blue Beetle costumes. They had the Blue Beetle ship and all that. I'm just like, oh my God, this is great. And this idea that it's kind of like he was kind of like this lo-fi version of Batman was a cool spin on things.
Hilarious. This is the lo-fi Batman.
Especially like, we had George Lopez coming in like Batman's a fascist. I love that.
Oh gosh, there was so many little Easter eggs and so many little things that I kind of wrote down that I was like, OMG, this is crazy. George Lopez mentioning something about pillaging cobalt from developing countries.
Yes.
I literally had just listened to an episode of, I can't remember if it was All Things Considered or if it was something else, but it was on NPR, and they were literally talking about cobalt being mined in Africa and the conditions of what the miners have to work through, and how it basically is, a lot. It basically looks like chattel slavery almost, of these conditions that they are having to, and I literally like listened to this probably about 5 days before I watched Blue Beetle. And when George Lopez says that, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're laughing, but at the same time, it's like, wow, this is too real. This is too real. I mean, he talks rich gentrification. He talks, he even mentions like Cruella Kardashian. He calls her Cruella Kardashian. I was like, this is so crazy. But I will say there's one part of this, and whether it's for better or for worse, is when they were trying to go after Jaime, and they went into the neighborhood and, basically burned their house down and tried to pull them out. And the father, having the heart attack and dying or whatever. That was very, to me, if I was an immigrant or if I had been in something in something like that, or it's just too real. It was very visceral. I guess that's the word I'm trying to think of. It was very visceral.
I can see that, and I think that's actually a strength of it, because I think it makes you really feel for like the experiences these people go through, and I think that part of it is a very important part of it, especially like with the henchman guy, right, and who had been through the School of the Americas and his experience and all. Like I think we kind of need to see that story to understand.
We do. We need to see it. We need to see it on that level, on that personal level, versus seeing it on the news where we are. Yeah.
Right.
We've got this objective distance and we've got our opinions, which are usually wrong because we don't have enough information. Anyway.
Right. And especially, or seeing it in like, a movie that's like dedicated to that sort of thing, where it's very easy for people to avoid it, like to work it into something like this. And like,
after you've already fallen in love with this family, because by that point, I'm just like, I love this family. And not only do I love this family, I see a lot of little things in what they're doing. I see that in my own family. You kind of start feeling for them. Even if you don't see, certain things that they're doing and you see it in your family, you do start feeling for them. And not start feeling for them, you've already fallen in love with them by this point. And to see how... no, they're not the government, but they're basically the government, let's just say. To see how they go in and how this actually a raid event, kind of event like this, how this affects neighborhoods and families, it's really something that you need to feel, that more of us need to feel. So we can...
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why Black Panther was such a triumph, because it had all these issues of racism and colonization all baked into a superhero movie. So it's, you can get those same themes addressed deep. Or you mentioned Barbie earlier, like using Barbie as like a way to talk about the patriarchy. If you do a movie that's just devoted to those things, people can easily avoid it. But when you put it in the veneer of a superhero movie or a comedy and all that, and then it's a lot easier to get people who would normally wouldn't pay attention to that to sit up and pay attention. Like I have kind of a wild theory that maybe you wouldn't have had as much support for BLM if you didn't have the success of Black Panther.
Yeah. Black Panther, and I will say, and I just watched this documentary, so that's just why I'm saying it, Black Panther and Black Twitter. So there's that.
I gotta see
my
that.
Gosh, that was a good one. But anyway, totally not nerdy or romantic. But I will say I will say to this point though, a lot of romance novels these days That's what they're doing. They're doing exactly that.
Very cool.
Yeah. And, they're getting red, because people are making money. So they are getting red.
Yeah.
But for this one, you're giving it 4 stars. I'm going to give it 4.5 stars because I'm just nice like that. But, this is one of those movies where this is probably one of those where a lot of people missed it. A lot of people slept on it the first time around, and I'm just going to tell you don't. Especially not in 2024, which is an election
in fact,
year.
I think all yes, and all 3 of these movies, Aquaman, Lost Kingdom, Shazam, Fury of the Gods, and Blue Beetle, I think a lot of people slept on all 3 of these because there was this idea that Flash was going to be like the final curtain on the DCEU. So it's kind of like, all right, well, nothing else after this matters until we get James Gunn's Superman. Right. So I think a lot of people slept on these movies, and actually all 3 of them are very good.
Yeah. So let's talk about Aquaman too. Then you thought so you're saying all 3 of these are really good. Now I'm gonna agree with you on that, but let's go into Aquaman 2. I want to know what you thought about it.
So, first, I'm going to preface this by saying that I loved the first Aquaman. Like, that was number 2, I think, in my DCEU ranking.
Okay.
And so I had very low expectations for The Lost Kingdom. But when I saw it, I'm just like, oh my God, this is really solid. And I think this was also like in the upper half, I think, of my rankings. It was probably like number 7 or maybe number 9 or something like that. It was pretty up there. And I thought it was, it's obvious. It's not as good as the first one. I will give it that. It is obvious where they decided they were going to cut back on Amber Heard. It seemed kind of obvious when they decided, okay, we're going to write her out for a big chunk of the movie here. Other than that, I mean, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed, the kind of redemption arc that we see for Orm. I thought that, Jason Momoa is still so much fun to watch as Aquaman. Yahya Abdul-Mateen and Randall Park were great. And just like, there's so many good things about this movie. It's not as good as the first one, but it's still a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed watching it.
I'm gonna have to agree with you. I loved it, except for the caveat that obviously Jason Momoa is just a delicious looking man.
Hey, I'm straight as an arrow, but he would make me have 7 thoughts.
Yes, I love it. I love it when that happens on the podcast, y'all. Oh my gosh. So the thing is, even though I'm a nerd, I'm also, going into a few of these superhero movies thinking, I just want to see the superhero. So that's how I went into the first Aquaman. I went into it thinking everybody's going to see this because Jason Momoa is going to be wet and shirtless most of the time. I mean, that was the thing. But I actually really love that movie. And I'm not, this is not a comparison. It is a comparison, but this is not a, I'm pitting these 2 against each other. I'm not. I'm just kind of making an analogy. I think here that the way Jason Momoa plays this Aquaman character is a lot like the way Chris Hemsworth plays the Thor character. Because
there's a lot of similarities.
Right?
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
Okay, all right. So I'm not too far off there. And it's just, you see it and like they're supposed to be all brawny and all whatever, but they're hilariously funny, and I think when I was going into the first Aquaman, I was thinking, okay, Jason Momoa, he looks good, but then I'm like, how's he going to play this? Because, the only reference that I have, are these, kind of violent things, like Game of Thrones or, or Conan. Exactly. You just have these like just violent things or whatever, but he's hilariously funny. And here in Aquaman 2 with him and the baby, it's just, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's so cute as Dad, this is just so hilariously funny. I like watching it. I like the story of it. I don't know how close that is to the comic or anything like that. And I honestly don't care because the story was good. You mentioned the Orm character, and I have so many little Easter eggs that I wrote down because I love the Orm character. I'm like, didn't know anything about this character, but I'm just like loving the Orm character, and I'm loving the kind of, back and forth that they have, right? So, this just was a fun, good time. And
well, something else you made me think of too is when you're talking about Jason Momoa, and I think something that this new breed of, male action stars we're seeing is a real redefinition of masculinity, because you've got these guys like Jason Momoa or Chris Hemsworth, Chris Evans, Chris Pine, all the Chris's basically, and but also Ryan Reynolds, Hugh Jackman. You've got these guys who are, these traditional images of masculinity with like the buff, ripped bods and everything, but they're not like the testosterone emotionalist type of action heroes we got, say, in like the 80s with like, Bruce Willis or Sylvester Stallone or Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like these are guys who can laugh at themselves. They're guys who can, take care of children. There's a sensitivity to them. And I think it's really cool that we're seeing this redefinition of what it means to be a...
I'm going to say that in my opinion, yes, I totally agree with that, but I'm going to take that a step further because I'm also looking at it from a romance perspective. And I was never the demographic for Terminator or Rambo or even maybe Rocky. Maybe Rocky I was. But I watched those movies and I love those movies, right? I'm just totally into them. And I think what happened with those heroes that are, masculine, but not in touch with who they are kind of thing. Part of that was we were not evolved as we are now, I think, emotionally.
Right.
But also part of that, Hollywood wise, is they're not even thinking that women actually go see these movies, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We're not even in the demographic, But now I think they realize, hey, women actually go see these movies. And we actually have an opinion about who we want to see. And we actually may have given Aquaman, the first one, we may have given that a lot more money than it would have gotten if it had been somebody else. Let's be honest.
I think you're very right. I think there's an absolute truth to that. And I think that could very well possibly is a driving factor behind this changing image of masculinity in these movies, because they know that these movies are not just it's not just guys going to see these movies. And it's not just a male power fantasy. It's also, women want to see these movies too, because they want to see, stories about female characters, which we'll get to when we talk about the Marvels, but also they want to see male characters who are show a different version of what it means to be a man, as opposed to this emotionalist robot type.
Exactly. And that trend is also growing in the romance world. I think you see a lot of what we call them cinnamon roll heroes. I write them cinnamon roll heroes. They're in touch with their emotions. They're not afraid to talk about their emotions. And also a lot of them, authors are writing a lot of them as being, very in touch with their male side, very in touch with their masculinity, right? Or what society deems being a very macho dude means. So they're macho, but they're at the same time, they're in touch with their feelings. And you see a lot of that happening right now in romance landia or in romance novels right now. But yeah, I think that's just the way society is trending, as we are getting more, as we understand more about what being masculine and being feminine means and getting in touch with ourselves, but also I think in general just what sells. And I think, and two, I also think, now people are actually writing these scripts with that in mind, that a woman may actually see this, and it may be a bunch of women and no man, right? It may not be a dude dragging his girlfriend to an action movie. It may actually be a bunch of women getting together to see this hero that's also good with the baby.
Well, I mean, to that point, like, we're going to talk about Shazam: Fury of the Gods next, and my wife was actually more interested in seeing that movie than I was. So I mean, I think that goes to prove your point, I think.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to agree with her. I was really like, and I will say this, I did not see the first Shazam because I got caught up. I will say this, I got caught up with the whole, I was trying to understand the whole lore of Shazam. And although we're not going to talk about Black Adam, just how Black Adam fits in, and I was too much into the research part of it, and I missed the whole first Shazam because I was just so trying to understand what that means. And then I was also hung up on the fact that, Shazam in the comics, when he had the power of Shazam, he became Captain Marvel. And then, of course, how Captain Marvel cannot be used by DC because Captain Marvel is used by Marvel and that whole thing. So there's, a bunch of layers and stuff like that. And I was trying to figure all that out. And of course, all of that came back to me as I realized, hey, guess what? You're going to sit down and watch Shazam 2, Fury of the Gods.
I think it's so funny that you got so caught up in your Shazam research that you forgot to watch Shazam.
Yes. And so the first Shazam just passed me by. But this one did not pass me by. And I'm so glad that it didn't. I'm glad that I sat and watched it because it was great. I thought it was great.
It was a lot of fun.
It was so fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's because this one got a lot of negative reception from a lot of the fans. And I was kind of surprised when I sat down and, and, it was actually, again, my buddy Justin, who I had on to talk about the DCEUs, like, he posted up on Facebook. He's like, wow, Fury of the Gods was excellent. I'm like, and I hadn't seen it at this point. I'm like, really? It was? Everyone else saying it was crap. And he's like, no, dude, watch it. It's actually really good. And I watched it. I'm like, oh, yeah. I mean, I think this is probably as good as the first Shazam. Like, they're both, it's very neck and neck. Like, I will recommend you should watch the first Shazam. It is
okay.
A lot of fun.
I'm totally going to do that, especially now that I've seen the second one. It's like I really got to watch the first one because I missed the whole wizard thing. I missed that whole thing where he was actually giving her the power for the first time and everything. And I was like, you know what? I'm missing a part of this. I really need to go back. One thing I forgot before we start talking about Shazam 2, Fury of the Gods. So what rating are you giving Aquaman to?
I think I'd probably go with a 3.5.
Okay. I'm going with a 4 on that, only because I have the Jason Momoa in love factor. There we go. We're going to add that.
That would be worth an extra half point, I think.
That is. Okay. So you're saying 3.5 stars. I'm saying 4 stars. I will say this too. Some of these I actually watched last weekend. Like, I literally just watched these last weekend or 2 weekends ago or something like that. So Blue Beetle, I rated that one a 5 after I first watched it. I'm rating it a 4.5 now. So just FYI, if that gets connected, because that is on YouTube somewhere. And maybe 2 people have watched that. So they might be like, oh, what happened? Nothing happened there. Nothing happened. Okay. I just forgot what I rated it. All right. So let's get back to Shazam 2, Fury of the Gods. So yeah, my first impression, of course, when I'm watching this is, I just thought this was so hilarious. And, I will say after I've watched Aquaman 2 and Blue Beetle, I watched Shazam, and I noticed, and I don't know if they're going to continue this or if this is just...
They're not.
They're not going to continue Shazam? Is that what you were saying?
Right. Well, at least not with these actors if they do continue. Like there hasn't been any announcement about any Shazam stuff as far as I can recall in any of the DCU announcements. So as of right now, there's nothing happening. There's nothing planned for Shazam.
And I kind of thought that, but I will say that the tone of all of these tend to be a little more on the funny side. It gives you kind of a little bit of what Marvel has been doing since they started with the MCU. They didn't, obviously, when they started with the MCU and they started with Iron Man, Iron Man was hilarious while not even breaking a smile. He is very sarcastic, funny. He drops numerous Easter eggs / jokes kinds of things. And I've noticed that a lot of these movies did that. Whereas before they got to this point, in my opinion, maybe Aquaman, the first Aquaman did this. The first Aquaman I noticed did this. But a lot of the DC movies before this point they've been trying to find a tone that works for their audience.
Yeah.
And it hasn't really worked for their audience or the audience that they're trying to get. It hasn't really worked. They've tried going darker. They've tried, being straight up corny, and campy. And, it just hasn't worked. And I think with these movies like Shazam 2 and Aquaman 2 and Blue Beetle, they have somehow harnessed that sarcastic preteen to adult humor, fast-paced, whatever. And they've kind of harnessed that. And I think they've kind of found a little bit of... I think these are landing with their audience. Unfortunately, I think, like you said earlier, everybody slept on these. But these would be the ones that, to me, would land that audience that they're trying to get, which is basically they're trying to take the Marvel audience, I think.
It's so ironic that they finally perfect the tone in the last movies right before they reboot.
Exactly.
So but to their credit, though, you do have James Gunn, who is a master at that tone. He took that formula that Joss Whedon established in the first Avengers movie, and he basically perfected it with the Guardians movies. I think.
Gosh, yes. Now that I know he's the one that did the Guardians movies, I'm there. I'm there. I think that this tone will kind of continue on and maybe even, really get better. So, I really loved that tone actually happened here in Shazam 2 because, even when they are riding the unicorns and that little girl.
The unicorn! Oh my God.
It was just hilarious. And that little girl was she just almost cursed. I was like, this is so great. I was like, this is so hilarious. I loved all of this. And I think, part of it for me with the first Shazam, other than getting caught up in what is the whole Shazam thing, I'm trying to understand the story. Before that, it's the whole, am I going to be bored watching Billy Batson or watching, an older guy play a 13-year-old? I've never really liked movies like that, where we really have a teenage mindset but we're really 20-something years old and we're switching bodies and blah, blah. And I think that was part of it for me, but I totally didn't feel that here.
Yeah. So you never liked Big?
Yeah, I was into it, but looking back on that, I enjoyed it then, but I don't enjoy it now.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Fair enough, because I think the best way to describe the first Shazam movie is basically big with superpowers. That's like the pure distillation of that movie. It is basically big with superpowers. So one of the things I will say is, like, you talked about Megan Good, who played
Yes.
the superhero form of
Yeah.
Darla. One of the things I think she did amazingly well, and I think it hasn't really been talked about because, in the grand scheme of things, she is just basically kind of like a minor character in this movie, but she does such an amazing job of making you believe that she really is a little girl in an adult body.
She does. I will say that. I will say she does that very well. And I was like, oh my gosh, I thought I was going to be annoyed, but I wasn't. I totally, this made me rethink. You know how, I'm trying to think of like the newer movies that do this, like Freaky Friday, or, when they change stuff like that. That was never really, that was not a thing for me. That's not been a thing for me. Like,
yeah. And I'm not sure if you've ever seen anything else with this actress, but Megan Good, she was in, did you ever see Brick?
Say it again.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt movie, Brick.
I don't think I've seen that. I've seen a lot of,
it's a very good movie.
A lot of stuff with her in it, which is why I was like,
okay.
Megan Good in a superhero movie? I was very...
So
I didn't... Is Brooke a superhero movie and I just missed it?
No. It's a mystery film. It's directed by Rian Johnson, who did, like, Glass Onion and Knives Out and Last Jedi and all those. Mm-hmm. So he did this mystery film with Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and basically it's Red Harvest, the Dashiell Hammett novel, but which has also been adapted into, like, Jimbo and Fistful of Dollars and Last Man Standing with Bruce Willis and all these. So it's this movie this story that's been told thousands of different times in different settings. He did it as a movie set in a high school setting. So it's like, instead of all these different gangs, you have these different cliques of people. And Megan Good plays like this theater girl, and she's kind of like the femme fatale, like, type of character. And she is amazing in that role as that femme fatale. So watching her in that, and then seeing her in this, playing like this,
kid,
child, like innocent. It's like, I'm just thinking about it now. I'm just like, oh my God, that's the same actress, and she has this incredible range.
Well, I'm gonna have to see that then, because
Brick is amazing. It's so good.
A lot of the things that I've seen Megan Good in, she tends to play a little bit towards the innocent. Now, I haven't...
Okay, yeah, you should definitely see Brick then, because she plays like this femme fatale type,
so
and she does an amazing job.
Okay, so I need to see her. But either way, everything I've seen her in, I've been like, okay, she's good in, So that's why when I saw her in this movie, I was like, wow, I wonder what she's going to do. But she did that brilliantly. I was like, yes, she's really good at this.
Also, here's an interesting piece of trivia about DJ Catrona, who plays Pedro's superhero form. Okay. He was cast as Superman at one point. Yes, he was supposed to play... So back in the early 2000s, I want to say, George Miller, from the who directed the Mad Max films, he was hired to do a Justice League film. It was going to be called Justice League Gods and Monsters. I think it was Mortal. Justice League Mortal is what it was going to be called. And it was going to be this, like, kind of pseudo animation style thing. So it would have been kind of like live action mixed with animation, kind of like the Beowulf movie, if you remember that.
I do.
So it was kind of like that is what it was kind of supposed to be like. And of the actors cast, like, DJ Catrona was cast to play Superman. So it's kind of cool to see him play. He didn't get... That movie ended up getting, I think it was the writer's strike back then that killed that movie. And then by the time the writer's strike had been resolved, Warner Brothers had moved on from the project, which is a disappointment, because everything we've heard about it sounds like it would have been amazing. Wow. But anyway, yeah, he was supposed to play Superman at one point, and so now he ends up getting to play one of the Shazam spinoffs instead.
That is wild. I love that though. I love that for him. I hate that we didn't get to see that though. That is...
It would have been great to see,
because he's funny. Oh gosh, he's funny, and oh gosh, Is his last name Brody? Now I'm spacing on the actor's names.
Oh, Adam Brody. Yeah.
Yes. I was
Yes.
like, I thought I would totally be annoyed by his character, but I totally wasn't. I was like,
no, Freddie in both this movie and the original Shazam was basically stole the show.
really?
Like, he was great in both.
Yeah,
Whether
I'm
it be
totally
whether
with
it's
you on that.
And because it, in the first movie, we only see Adam Brody in just basically at that end scene when he becomes a superhero. So he doesn't really have a whole lot to do in that movie. So it's basically just the guy who plays Freddy and his human guys, Jack Dylan Grazer, who is doing the bulk of the performance. But, you watch them in this, and it's clear that Adam Brody was taking notes when he watched that first Shazam movie, because he, perfectly matches what Grazer's doing as the real Freddy.
He does. And it's just, it's almost like, this person has transformed. Like, they really are, a lot of them are really just very close to their young, regular people counterparts. And, I loved all of this. For some reason, I have so many notes here that I haven't said anything. Oh, so the whole Shazam and Wonder Woman, and he's got a crush on Wonder Woman, that whole thing is just totally hilarious. And
I thought that was great.
Just thought that was totally hilarious. And then, the mid-credit scene, where he thinks he's gonna be, in the Justice League, but he's not gonna be in the Justice League. They want him in the Justice Society.
The Justice Society. Right, which is from Black Adam. Which is an interesting side note of that, is that the original plan was they were going to have the Justice Society characters from Black Adam in that scene. But again, this was the Dwayne Johnson power play BS, and so that's why they ended up having the Peacemaker cast instead.
Yeah, because I was like, that was kind of weird. Okay, all right, so that makes sense. So I'm wondering if they're actually going to go forward with all of that. Well, anyway, we don't know if they're going forward.
No,
with the
they're not going to go.
thing.
They're going to go.
And of course,
right,
Black
they're not
Adam
going forward
is
with Shazam.
over. That is
right,
totally over.
They haven't announced anything about the Justice Society as far as I've seen, so we're probably not going to see anything with them, at least not in this first wave of stuff they got going on. But in the comics, Captain Marvel was a member of the Justice Society, and he was one of these Golden Age comic book characters originally. In fact, he wasn't a DC character.
Right.
Originally, he was created by Fawcett, and he was inspired by Superman. At one point, he was actually outselling Superman, which is why DC sued Fawcett over copyright infringement. And Fawcett ended up going bankrupt, and they stopped publishing the character. And then when Fawcett closed its doors, DC bought the rights to the Captain Marvel character. But at that point, the trademark had lapsed, and Marvel had snapped up the trademark, and they've kept it in continuous usage. So DC still called the character Captain Marvel for decades.
Yes.
But they couldn't use it in merchandise. Nope. They couldn't use it on the comic covers. Nope. So the comic book that he was in was always called The Power of Shazam. If you look those old DC action figures, there was always called Shazam. So I was actually kind of surprised when I read a DC comic and everyone was calling him Captain Marvel. So it wasn't until, and then eventually in 2011, they finally decided we're just going to call him Shazam and keep it out and just get rid of that problem.
Yeah, and folks, this is why I missed the first Shazam. All of that he just, that's why I know all of that. Because that's why I missed it, because I was sitting there researching all this. But one thing that I didn't know that I just realized from this movie is they did have a live action Shazam TV show. And when they were talking, gosh, why can't I remember anybody's name? When Shazam, I keep wanting to call him Chuck, but that is another character.
Oh, Zachary Levi.
Yes. Yeah. When Shazam's character is talking about, what is your name? And he's out on the street or whatever. And somebody yells out Captain Marvel. That is the guy that played Billy Batson in the Shazam TV show. And I didn't realize, A, there was a Shazam TV show until I saw this. And B, I didn't realize that they were calling him Captain Marvel. Like when Shazam, Shazams and becomes Captain Marvel. They were calling him Captain Marvel in that TV show. And that was in 70s, 1974.
Yeah, and also there was a Captain Marvel movie back in like 1941. It was a serial. Wow. It's called The Adventures of Captain Marvel, and it's available for free on YouTube. You can watch it free.
Really?
It's a serial, so it's like 3 hours.
Oh wow!
But we did an episode on it on Superhero Cinephiles, and it's surprisingly well done.
Really?
Like for the time period, because you think like a superhero serial in the 1940s is probably going to be like unbelievably cheesy, but it was actually pretty sophisticated, and like the stunt work was actually really well done too.
Wow.
We actually had my guest for that was actually a former stuntman, so he had a lot of knowledge about that. It actually made him want to be a stuntman when he saw that as a kid. Wow,
that is cool, man. Imagine working on a superhero movie in the 1940s. Okay.
I know.
That would be so wild. Oh my gosh. But anyway, going off the rails here. Yeah, there were so many, y'all know I love my Easter eggs and dropping Easter eggs and things. There were so many here. I love the whole part where Shazam is at the therapist and he's talking imposter syndrome and, he's dropping all the names there. I loved, at first I thought they were going to do some 80s things, but it was really just a really cool reference. He's saving a woman while she's in her car and they're playing the I Need a Hero song. And then he calls Lucy Liu's character, he calls her Khaleesi because she's riding a track.
Yes.
I just busted out laughing.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Lucy Liu. One thing I've got a question about Lucy Liu.
Yeah.
Is she a vampire? Does she have like an aged portrait in her attic? Right? Because she has not aged in like 30 years.
Exactly. At all. Not aged at all.
Her, Paul Rudd, and Keanu Reeves are like are some sort of immortal.
They have to be. They have to be vampires. I think I saw somewhere that he just turned, but he being Keanu Reeves just turned like 59 or something. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, no, not possible.
No.
I just turned 40 and I look older than Keanu Reeves does.
Oh my gosh, it's just so crazy. Oh, but I loved Helen Mirren in this too. I just wanted to say I loved Helen Mirren in this. And I'm like, wow, this really got people really slept on this because I didn't really hear anybody. Now, granted, I try to stay away from the buzz, but I didn't hear, but this has been a long time, so I didn't hear any buzz. And I'm like,
no, I heard like nothing. Like everybody's, the people who did see it, mostly people were talking smack about it. So I was, really surprised when, my buddy was like, no, it's actually really good. You got to watch it. And I watched it. I'm like, oh yeah, this is really good. This is a lot of fun.
It is.
I mean, the family themes, it had a lot of heart to it.
Very much
it was
funny. That was the first thing I put down. I'm like, if you love the found family trope, y'all, this is the found family trope on steroids. This is amazing.
Exactly.
But the humor is just what kind of leads you through all of it. I mean, even John Hansu as the wizard, he's sarcastic and grumpy, and I loved his character.
I never knew Jimon Hansu had such a talent for comedy.
Right.
Like, he was great.
I've never seen him in like a comedic role like that. Where he
I cannot think of any time I've seen him like that.
Just amazing. Just totally amazing. So what star rating are we giving this, Perry? Or what star rating are you giving this?
I'm thinking maybe a 3.5 as well. I'll give this the same one as I gave Aquaman.
All right, 3.5. And I think online I gave this one a 4. So I'm going to keep my 4 here. But totally funny and totally entertaining. And, especially if you're like in a point where you're just like, oh, you're having that feeling, you just need something fun and something to take you out of whatever you've got going on in your life. You need to watch Shazam too. It doesn't matter if you haven't.
And I think one of the reasons, well, yeah, I mean, and in fact, I think that's one of the reasons why I kind of knocked it down to 3.5, because I've seen the first Shazam movie, so it doesn't offer a whole lot new from the first Shazam movie, and they're both very good. Like I said, in my ranking, these were like basically I had Shazam and then I had Shazam 2 right after it, so they're very close. So I think that's one of the reasons why I kind of knocked it down a little bit, is because I already have the familiarity with the first Shazam movie, so this one, it's not bringing a whole lot new to the table.
But if you haven't seen the first one, it is bringing a whole lot of fun. It's bringing a whole lot of fun anyway. It's bringing a whole lot of fun anyway. Yes. But so let's maybe take a little bit of a break, and then we're gonna go into Marvel, because if we've talked this much about DC, I think we're gonna be also talking a lot about Marvel. Okay.
Mm-hmm. All right, sounds good to me.
While that's the end of our discussion, it's not the end of the story. Check out my website at nerdyromanticspodcast.com. And while you're there, sign up for my newsletter to get show notes of the episodes in your inbox. And if you want to see me, my guests, and my guest co-hosts on video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/author Y.M. Nelson. Thanks for listening and for watching. Stardate, not too distant future. Brandon is a diehard Trekkie. He's watched every Star Trek franchise episode multiple times. He has several cosplay and collectible uniforms in his closet. Commander Will Riker is his favorite cosplay character, and he's been to dozens of conventions. But he's never met or gotten in a fight with another Trekkie like Phoenix. Phoenix is looking forward to her first Star Trek convention until she meets Brandon. He's nothing like the Riker character she loves to hate. He's combative, socially awkward, and off-putting. But he's so adorable. Phoenix and Brandon keep running into each other, each time more heated than the next. With 3 days of convention to get through, will they get past the hostility and find what they know is there? Attraction and perhaps love? This is the premise of Stardate, a free e-story for my newsletter subscribers, available on February 1st. If you like Trekkie romance, romantic comedy, or just like to see a little grumpy sunshine trope, this story is for you. Go to ymnelson.com/subscribe and get your free copy.